I regret every day I spent with you, Maren said, her voice completely flat, like she was reading a grocery list. I stood there in our kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching my wife of 6 years deliver what felt like a prepared statement. No emotion, no inflection, just a simple declaration that our marriage was over. The rain hammered against the windows of our Pacific Northwest home, the kind of steady downpour that made Seattle famous. Gray light filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting everything in that perpetual twilight that defined our corner of the world. Maren stood by the granite counter, still wearing her business suit from whatever meeting she'd claimed to attend last night. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she meant business. "That's it?" I asked, setting down the mug. 6 years, and that's your closing argument? She didn't even look at me, just stared out the window at the rain-soaked street. "There's nothing left to argue about, Reid." Reid Trenner. That's me. 42 years old, ex-federal agent turned private investigator, currently standing in my own kitchen getting dismissed like a disappointing employee. I'd spent 15 years with the Bureau before going freelance, specializing in surveillance and background checks for law firms and insurance companies. Not glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept my skills sharp. Maren Hollis, she'd kept her maiden name for professional reasons, was everything I wasn't. High-powered project manager at Cascade Financial, the kind of woman who wore designer suits and spoke in corporate buzzwords. Beautiful in that cold, polished way that made men stumble over themselves in elevators. I'd been one of those men once, back when we met at a bar in Belltown 5 years ago. "You know what?" I said, twisting my wedding ring off my finger. The gold band caught the gray light as I set it on the counter between us. "I think I regret a few days myself." For the first time that morning, Maren looked directly at me. Her green eyes showed a flicker of something, surprise maybe, or annoyance that I wasn't begging her to reconsider. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "Dramatic?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, you just torched 6 years with the enthusiasm of someone canceling a magazine subscription. I think a little drama is warranted." I walked to the front door, grabbed my leather jacket from the hook, and pulled out my phone. The camera app opened with a swipe, and I snapped a photo of my bare left hand against the dark wood of our front door, typed out a caption, "Back to bachelor life," posted it to Instagram at exactly 9:47 p.m. Then I walked out into the rain without looking back. My truck started on the second try, a miracle, considering the weather and the fact that I'd been meaning to replace the battery for 3 months. I drove through the empty streets of Bellingham, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour, until I reached my brother's apartment complex on the south side of town. Danny answered the door in boxers and a Seahawks t-shirt, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without a word. His place was a typical bachelor pad. Leather couch, enormous TV, empty pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table. The kind of setup I'd probably have again soon. "Beer?" he asked. "Make it 2. We sat in silence for a while, watching highlights from a game neither of us cared about. Danny was 3 years younger, worked construction, and had the good sense to stay single after his divorce 5 years back. He'd warned me about Maren from the beginning, said she had the warmth of an IRS audit, but I'd been too smitten to listen. My phone buzzed at 10:02 p.m., 15 minutes after the post. The text was from Lyra Ventrix. "We need to talk, not about what you think." I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times. Lyra was Maren's closest friend, the kind of gorgeous woman who made other women hate themselves and men forget their own names. 5'8", platinum blonde, worked in marketing for some tech startup downtown. She'd been to our house dozens of times, always perfectly polite, always perfectly dressed, always perfectly aware of the effect she had on every man in the room. "What the hell?" I muttered. "What?" Danny asked, muting the TV. I showed him the phone. "Maren's friend wants to talk." Danny read the message and raised an eyebrow. "The hot blonde?" "That's the one." "Dude, you've been single for exactly 15 minutes and you're already getting offers? Maybe this divorce thing isn't so bad after all." I wasn't so sure. In my experience, when beautiful women wanted to talk, it usually meant trouble was coming. And after the day I'd had, I wasn't sure how much more trouble I could handle. But curiosity can be costly. I typed back, "When and where?" The response came immediately. "Tomorrow, noon. The Lantern Room downtown. Come alone." The Lantern Room was one of those trendy bars that charged $15 for cocktails and played jazz music at volumes that forced you to lean in, close to hear conversation. Not exactly the kind of place I'd expect to meet my ex-wife's best friend for whatever this was about. "I'm meeting her tomorrow," I told Danny, Smart money says she's going to tell you what a bastard you are for breaking her friend's heart. Maybe, or maybe there's more to this story than I thought. Danny looked at me with the expression he'd worn since we were kids, the one that said I was about to do something stupid and he couldn't talk me out of it. Reid, whatever you're thinking, don't. You just got out of one mess. Don't go looking for another one. But I was already thinking like an investigator again, turning over possibilities in my mind. Why would Lyra reach out so quickly? Why specify that it wasn't about what I thought? And why did she want to meet alone? I'd spent enough years interviewing witnesses and suspects to know when someone had information they were afraid to share. The question was whether that information would help me understand why my marriage had imploded, or whether it would make everything worse. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, and I found myself wondering if Maren was still awake in our house. Her house now, I supposed, or if she was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Either way, tomorrow I'd get some answers. In my experience, the truth was usually uglier than people expected, but it was always better than living in the dark. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from an unknown number. Sorry about tonight. Em didn't mean for it to happen like that. I showed Danny the message. Anonymous apology. This day just keeps getting weirder. Block the number, he said. Whatever game they're playing, you don't want to be a piece on their board. But I was already a piece on someone's board. The question was whether I was a pawn or a player, and tomorrow's meeting with Lyra might give me the answer. I finished my beer, thanked Danny for the couch, and tried to sleep while the rain drummed against the windows and my mind raced through possibilities I wasn't sure I wanted to explore. Tomorrow would bring answers, whether I was ready for them or not. The lantern room at noon was exactly what I'd expected: dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and the kind of atmosphere that made everything feel like a conspiracy. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a corner booth where I could watch the entrance. Old habits from my bureau days. Lyra walked in at exactly 12 o'clock, and every conversation in the place paused for a beat. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my truck payment, her platinum hair falling in waves over her shoulders. She spotted me immediately and walked over with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was the most attractive person in any room she entered. "Reid," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thanks for coming." "Not sure I had much choice. Your text was pretty cryptic." She ordered a martini from the waitress, extra dirty, extra olives, and waited until we were alone before speaking again. "What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about your marriage. My marriage ended last night. Hard to change something that's already over." "That's where you're wrong." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "Maren didn't leave you because she fell out of love. She left you because she got caught." The envelope was thick, maybe 50 pages of documents. I opened it carefully, like it might explode, and found myself looking at bank statements, hotel receipts, and screenshots of text messages. Lots of text messages. "What is this?" 18 months of evidence, Lyra said, taking a sip of her martini. Every business trip that wasn't a business trip, every book club meeting that never happened, every late night at the office that was actually a late night at the Fairmont. I flipped through the pages, my investigative training kicking in automatically. The bank statements showed cash withdrawals on specific dates. The hotel receipts matched those dates. The text messages were between Maren and someone listed in her phone as DV. Who's DV? Derek Vaughn, corporate attorney, handles mergers and acquisitions for Cascade Financial. Also handles your wife, apparently. The text messages were explicit enough to make me want to throw the phone across the room. Detailed descriptions of hotel room encounters, plans for weekend getaways, discussions about leaving their respective spouses. The timestamps showed they'd been exchanged while I was working surveillance jobs, sitting in my car for 12 hours at a stretch to pay for the house Maren was using as her personal dating service. "How did you get all this?" Lyra's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because I'm the one who arranged it all." I looked up from the papers, trying to process what she'd just said. "You're what?" "Hotel reservations, alibi coordination, cash withdrawals from accounts Derek set up. I was their logistics coordinator, Reid, their fixer." "Why?" "Because Maren promised me things. Financial backing for my startup, a partnership in some real estate investments, access to her network of wealthy clients." She took another sip of her martini. Turns out those promises were worth about as much as her marriage vows. I leaned back in the booth, trying to wrap my head around what I was hearing. "So, you're telling me that my wife's best friend helped her cheat on me, and now you're confessing because she didn't pay you enough?" "I'm confessing because she tried to cut me out entirely. Last week she told me the arrangement was over, said she was filing for divorce and didn't need my services anymore. Then yesterday, I found out she'd been telling Derek that I was unstable, that I might cause problems for them. So this is revenge. This is justice. Lyra's green eyes were cold as winter rain. Maren used you, Reid. She used me too. But at least I knew what I was getting into. You were just the convenient husband who worked nights and asked no questions. I flipped through more pages, finding patterns that made my stomach turn. Every time I'd worked a late surveillance job, Maren had made plans with Derek. Every business trip I'd taken had coincided with their hotel reservations. They'd been using my own schedule against me for a year and a half. There's more, Lyra said, sliding another document across the table. This is a copy of a home equity line of credit application. Recognize the signature? I looked at the paperwork and felt something cold settle in my chest. The signature was mine, but I'd never seen this document before. Someone had forged my name to secure a $60,000 line of credit against our house. Maren? Maren and Derek. They've been siphoning money out of your joint accounts and this HELOC for 6 months, funding their little love affair with your assets. I did the math quickly. Between the cash withdrawals and the credit line, they'd stolen close to $80,000. Money I'd earned sitting in surveillance vehicles, following cheating spouses and insurance fraudsters, while my own wife was robbing me blind. Why are you showing me this now? Because Maren's lawyer is filing papers this afternoon. She's going to claim emotional abuse, financial control, the whole victim playbook. She'll get the house, half your retirement account, and probably alimony. Meanwhile, Derek gets promoted to senior partner next month, and they ride off into the sunset with your money. The waitress refilled my coffee, and I waited until she was gone before speaking again. What do you want from me? I want them to pay for what they did, to both of us. And how exactly do you propose we do that? Lyra's smile was predatory. You're a private investigator, Reid. You know how to gather evidence. You know how to build a case. And now you have everything you need to destroy them both. I looked at the envelope full of evidence, thinking about the implications. Bank fraud, forgery, adultery. There were criminal charges hiding in these documents, not just grounds for divorce. But there were also risks. If I went after them legally, it would be my word against theirs, and they had resources I didn't. There's something else you should know, Lyra said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Derek's married. His wife doesn't know about any of this. So we're talking about destroying 2 marriages, not just mine. Derek's marriage was a business arrangement from the start. His wife's family has money and connections. The only reason he hasn't left her already is because he's waiting for his promotion to go through. I finished my coffee and made a decision that would change everything. What's your plan? First, we stop the divorce proceedings. These bank records prove fraud, which gives you grounds for a criminal complaint. That'll freeze all the assets until the investigation is complete. And then? Then we make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people Maren Hollis and Derek Vaughn really are. I thought about Maren's flat delivery that morning, the way she'd dismissed 6 years like they were nothing. I thought about the money they'd stolen, the lies they'd told, the way they'd used my own work schedule to facilitate their affair. I'm in, I said. Lyra raised her martini glass. To justice. To justice, I agreed, though I suspected what we were really toasting was revenge. The rain had stopped by the time we left the lantern room, but the sky was still gray and threatening. Lyra handed me a business card with her personal number written on the back. Call me tonight. We'll start planning phase 2. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the wet pavement, and wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the smartest decision I'd ever made. Either way, Maren and Derek were about to learn that some people fought back when cornered, and after 15 years in federal law enforcement, I knew exactly how to fight dirty when the situation called for it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed your lunch meeting. Some conversations are more interesting than others. Someone was watching. The game was already more complicated than I'd thought. But I'd been playing complicated games for a long time, and I was very good at winning them. That evening, I spread Lyra's evidence across Danny's kitchen table like I was preparing for a federal case. Bank statements, hotel receipts, forged documents, and screenshots of text messages that painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive it took my breath away. Jesus Christ, Danny said, looking over my shoulder at a particularly explicit message exchange. She really said that about you? Apparently I'm emotionally unavailable and disappointing, I read from Maren's text to Derek. Also, I quote, completely clueless about what's happening in his own house. Well, she got one thing right. I looked up at my brother. Thanks for the support. Hey, I'm just saying, you were working 60-hour weeks while she was running a hotel with some corporate lawyer. Maybe pay attention next time. Danny was right, but it stung anyway. I'd been so focused on building my private investigation business that I'd missed the biggest investigation of my life, the one happening in my own home. My phone rang. Lyra's number. "How's the reading?" she asked. "Educational. Oh, I had no idea my wife had such a creative vocabulary." "That's nothing. Wait until you see what I'm sending you now." My email chimed with a new message. The subject line read, Phase 2 Evidence. I opened the attachment and found myself looking at photographs, Derek and Maren entering the Fairmont Hotel, Derek's hand on her lower back, both of them laughing like teenagers skipping school. When were these taken? Last Tuesday, while you were doing surveillance on that insurance fraud case in Tacoma. I remembered that job. 12 hours in my car watching a guy who claimed he couldn't work due to back injury spend the day moving furniture for his girlfriend. I'd gotten home at midnight to find Maren already asleep, or pretending to be. There are more, Lyra continued. Video of them at dinner, audio recordings of phone conversations. I've been documenting everything for months. Why? If you were helping them, why collect evidence against them? Insurance policy. In my line of work, you never know when people are going to try to throw you under the bus. Smart woman. Ruthless, but smart. What's our next move? Tomorrow morning, Derek's wife gets an anonymous package. Photos, bank statements, hotel receipts, everything she needs to know that her husband is a cheating thief. And Maren? Maren's more complicated. She's got a board meeting on Friday where they're announcing her promotion to senior project manager. Imagine how that would go if certain information became public. I could imagine. Cascade Financial prided itself on corporate integrity. Having a senior manager involved in fraud and adultery wouldn't play well with the board of directors. You want to destroy her career. I want her to face consequences for her actions. There's a difference. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Either way, I was committed now. Send me everything you have, I said. I'll put together a comprehensive file. Already done. Check your email. The second attachment was massive. Hundreds of documents, photos, audio files, and video clips. Enough evidence to bury both Maren and Derek so deep they'd need archaeological equipment to dig themselves out. I spent the next 3 hours organizing everything chronologically, building a timeline that showed the progression of their affair and the escalation of their financial crimes. It was methodical work, the kind of detailed investigation I'd done hundreds of times for clients. But this time, it was personal. The pattern was clear. They'd started with small cash withdrawals, testing to see if I'd notice. When I didn't, they'd gotten bolder. Hotel rooms became weekend getaways. Dinner dates became shopping sprees. The forged HELOC was their biggest score, $60,000 they'd planned to use as seed money for some real estate investment Derek had pitched to Maren. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. I showed the message to Danny. Looks like someone's getting nervous. You think it's Derek? Probably, though it could be Maren. Either way, they know I'm onto them. Maybe you should listen. This is getting dangerous. Dangerous how? They're corporate criminals, not the mafia. But even as I said it, I wondered how far Derek might go to protect his promotion and his marriage. Corporate lawyers had access to resources and connections I didn't. If he decided I was a threat to his future, he might try to eliminate that threat. My email chimed again. This time the sender was Maren. Reid, we need to talk. There are things you don't understand about our situation. Can we meet tomorrow evening? I think we can work something out that benefits everyone. I stared at the message, trying to read between the lines. Was she offering to negotiate? Trying to buy my silence? Or was this some kind of trap? I forwarded the email to Lyra and called her. She's panicking, Lyra said immediately. Derek probably told her about the threatening text backfiring. So what do I do? Meet with her, but record everything, and make sure you're somewhere public. The lantern room again? No, somewhere with more witnesses. The lobby bar at the Fairmont. Ironic, considering how much time she spent there lately. I agreed to meet Maren the next evening, then spent another hour reviewing the evidence. The more I read, the angrier I became. They hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen time, trust, and 6 years of my life. They'd made me complicit in my own humiliation by using my work schedule to facilitate their affair. But anger was useful. It focused the mind, sharpened the instincts. And after 15 years in federal law enforcement, I knew how to channel anger into action. I called Maren back and agreed to meet at the Fairmont at 7 p.m. Then I set up a digital recorder app on my phone and made sure the battery was fully charged. Tomorrow night, I'd get the truth, or at least Maren's version of it. Either way, the game was accelerating, and I intended to be ready for whatever came next. Danny looked at me from across the kitchen table, where the evidence was still spread out like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. You sure about this, Reid? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. They already pulled the trigger, I said, looking at a photo of my wife kissing another man in a hotel lobby. I'm just returning fire. Outside, the rain started again, drumming against the windows like an ominous soundtrack to whatever was coming next. The Fairmont's lobby bar was exactly the kind of place where guilty people met to discuss their crimes. Dim lighting, soft jazz, and enough ambient noise to mask incriminating conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table near the window where I could watch Maren's approach. She walked in at exactly 7 o'clock, and for a moment I remembered why I'd fallen for her 5 years ago. Auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of understated elegance that made other women look like they were trying too hard. She wore a charcoal business suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who was used to controlling every situation. But tonight, there were cracks in that confidence. Her smile was too tight, her movements too careful. She was nervous, and that gave me an advantage. Reid, she said, sliding into the chair across from me, thank you for coming. Seemed like the least I could do, considering you regret every day you spent with me. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I said that badly. I was emotional. You were flat as a pancake. If that was emotional, I'd hate to see you when you're really upset. The waitress took our drink orders. Wine for Maren, coffee for me. I needed to stay sharp for this conversation. I know you're angry, Maren began once we were alone. You have every right to be, but there are things about our marriage that you don't understand. Try me. We grew apart, Reid. You were always working, always focused on your cases. I felt like I was living with a stranger. So you decided to live with Derek Vaughn instead? Her composure slipped for just a moment. How do you know about Derek? I'm a private investigator, Maren. It's literally what I do for a living. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? She took a sip of wine, buying time to think. Derek and I... It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. For 18 months? Another slip. Her eyes widened slightly before she caught herself. It hasn't been that long. Hotel receipts say otherwise. Bank statements, too. Turns out you and Derek have been very busy spending my money on your relationship. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, making sure she could see what I was doing. Let's try this again. Tell me about the $60,000 you and Derek stole using my forged signature. You can't record me without my consent? Washington is a two-party consent state for private conversations, but we're in a public place, and I just told you I'm recording, so you can either talk to me or you can talk to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Your choice. The mention of federal involvement got her attention. Maren had always been smart enough to understand the implications of her actions, even if she wasn't smart enough to avoid them. What do you want? She asked. I want the truth. All of it. Starting with when you and Derek decided to turn my marriage into a criminal enterprise. She looked around the bar, probably checking for escape routes or witnesses. Finding neither comfort nor advantage, she leaned forward and lowered her voice. It started as an emotional affair. Derek was handling some contracts for Cascade, and we worked together on a few projects. He understood the pressures I was under, the way corporate life can isolate you. Unlike your emotionally unavailable husband. You read the texts? Every word. Very educational. I had no idea I was such a disappointment in bed. Maren's cheeks flushed. Those were private conversations. So was our marriage, but that didn't stop you from sharing details with your lover. She took another sip of wine, and I could see her calculating how much to reveal. The physical relationship started about a year ago. Derek was going through problems with his wife, and I was lonely. So you decided to steal my money to fund your midlife crisis. The money was for investments. Derek had opportunities that required capital. My capital, obtained through forgery and fraud. It was going to be temporary. We were going to pay it back. With what? Your promotion bonus? Derek's partnership profits? Her silence was answer enough. Here's what I think happened, I continued. You and Derek fell in love, or at least convinced yourselves you did. You wanted to leave your respective spouses, but you needed money to start over, so you decided to steal mine. It wasn't stealing. We're married. Community property. Forgery is still a felony, even between spouses. And I'm pretty sure Derek's wife doesn't consider their assets community property with you. Maren finished her wine and signaled for another. What do you want, Reid? Money? The house? I'll make this easy for you. I want you to withdraw the divorce petition. What? You heard me. Call your lawyer tomorrow and withdraw the petition. Tell him you want to try marriage counseling. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to the FBI with evidence of bank fraud, forgery, and money laundering. I'm also going to Derek's wife with photos of your hotel visits, and I'm going to Cascade Financial's board of directors with documentation of your relationship with their legal counsel. The second glass of wine arrived, and Maren's hand shook slightly as she lifted it. You're bluffing. Am I? You know my background, Maren. You know I understand how federal investigations work. How long do you think it would take them to trace the money trail? How long before Derek's law firm drops him to avoid the scandal? Derek has connections. His family has influence. His family also has a reputation to protect. Think they'll stand by him when the headlines start running? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the rain-slicked streets. What happens if I withdraw the petition? We have a conversation about restitution. You and Derek pay back every penny you stole, with interest. You end your relationship immediately, and you both sign confessions that I'll hold as insurance against future bad behavior. And if we don't, then you find out how much justice costs when you can't afford a good lawyer. Maren finished her second glass of wine faster than the first. I need to talk to Derek. You have 24 hours. After that, I start making phone calls. She stood up, her movements less steady than when she'd arrived. You're not the man I married, Reid. Neither are you the woman I married. Difference is, I'm not a criminal. She walked away without another word, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer. I watched her leave, then sat in the bar for another hour, reviewing the recording and planning my next moves. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyra. How did it go? She's scared. Wants to talk to Derek before deciding. Good. Fear makes people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that give us more evidence. I left the Fairmont and drove through the rainy streets, thinking about the conversation. Maren was cornered, but cornered animals were dangerous. She and Derek would probably try to find a way to turn the situation to their advantage, maybe even try to frame me for something. But I'd been playing this game longer than they had, and I understood the rules better than they thought. My phone rang as I pulled into Danny's driveway. Unknown number. Reid Trenner. This is Derek Vaughn. We need to talk. I just finished talking to your girlfriend. What's left to discuss? A business proposition, something that benefits everyone involved. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m., the parking garage at Pike Place Market, level 3. Public place. I like that you're thinking about safety. Just be there, Trenner, and come alone. The line went silent, and I sat in my truck for a moment, rain drumming on the roof, thinking about what Derek might be planning. Whatever it was, I'd be ready for it. The game was accelerating, and tomorrow night would determine whether I was hunting or being hunted. Pike Place Market's parking garage at 9 p.m. was a concrete tomb filled with shadows and the echo of distant traffic. I arrived early and positioned myself where I could see the elevator and stairwell entrances. Old habits from my federal days. The third level was mostly empty except for a few cars belonging to late shift workers and people who couldn't afford downtown parking rates. Derek Vaughn arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, stepping out of a black Tesla that probably cost more than I made in a year. He was everything I'd expected from Maren's texts. Tall, athletic, the kind of artificially confident bearing that came from growing up wealthy and never facing real consequences. Trenner, he said, walking over with his hands visible. Smart man, considering my background. Vaughn, nice car. Must be nice having other people pay for your toys. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I hear you've been having conversations with my business partner. Your business partner? Maren. We've been working together on some investments. Funny way to describe fraud and adultery. That's a harsh interpretation of a complex situation. Derek had the smooth delivery of someone who'd spent years talking his way out of trouble. Corporate lawyers were good at making black look gray, wrong look justified. Let's cut through the lawyer speak, I said. What do you want? I want to offer you a deal, something that makes this situation work for everyone. I'm listening. Derek reached into his jacket, slowly, keeping his movements visible, and pulled out a manila envelope. Cashier's check for $100,000. Tax-free settlement for your inconvenience. I looked at the envelope, but didn't take it. In exchange for what? You disappear, quietly. No federal investigations, no phone calls to my wife, no drama with Cascade Financial. You take the money, file for divorce on irreconcilable differences, and everyone moves on with their lives. What makes you think I'm for sale? Everyone's for sale, Trenner. It's just a matter of finding the right price. And you think my price is $100,000? I think your price is avoiding a war you can't win. Derek's confidence was starting to annoy me. Explain. You're a small-time private investigator with an office above a coffee shop. I'm a partner at Morrison, Klein & Associates with connections throughout the legal and financial community. Maren's a senior project manager at one of the fastest-growing fintech companies in the Pacific Northwest. We have resources you don't, influence you can't match. You also have criminal exposure I don't. Do we? Prove it. He was calling my bluff, betting that I didn't have enough evidence to make criminal charges stick. It was a reasonable bet. Financial crimes were notoriously difficult to prosecute, especially when the defendants could afford good lawyers. I've got bank records, hotel receipts, forged documents. You've got circumstantial evidence of an extramarital affair and some questionable financial transactions. Nothing that rises to the level of federal charges. Derek was right, and we both knew it. The evidence Lyra had given me was compelling, but not conclusive. A good defense attorney could explain away most of it, especially if the defendants presented a united front. What about your wife? Think she'll be understanding when she sees the photos. My wife and I have an arrangement. She's not as naive as you were. And Cascade Financial? They cool with their senior managers committing adultery with their legal counsel? Corporate morality clauses are harder to enforce than you might think, especially when both parties are valuable employees with clean professional records. I was starting to understand why Maren had been attracted to Derek. He was smart, ruthless, and completely amoral. The kind of man who could rationalize any behavior as long as it served his interests. So what happens if I don't take your generous offer? Derek's smile turned predatory. Then you find out how expensive justice can be when you're fighting people who can afford to make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You want to play hardball with people who own the stadium. I looked at the envelope again, thinking about my options. $100,000 was more money than I'd see in 2 years of private investigation work. It would pay off my truck, cover Danny's medical bills from his construction accident last year, maybe even let me take a vacation somewhere warm. But it would also mean letting Maren and Derek get away with stealing from me, lying to me, and treating my marriage like a joke. I need to think about it, I said. 24 hours. After that, the offer expires and things get complicated. Derek walked back to his Tesla, and I watched him drive away into the Seattle night. Then I sat in my truck for a while, listening to the rain and thinking about what he'd said. He was right about the resources. Morrison, Klein & Associates was one of the most powerful law firms in the state, and Cascade Financial had enough political connections to make trouble disappear. If I went to war with them, it would be David versus Goliath, except Goliath had lawyers and accountants instead of armor. But I'd been David before, back in my federal days. Sometimes the giant fell down. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyra. How did it go with Derek? He offered me $100,000 to disappear. Are you going to take it? I thought about that question as I drove through the empty streets toward Danny's apartment. $100,000 was a lot of money for someone in my position. It was also an admission of guilt from Derek, proof that he knew he was vulnerable. But there was something else bothering me about the meeting, something that didn't add up. Derek had been too confident, too sure of himself, like he knew something I didn't. I called Lyra when I got back to Danny's place. There's something wrong with this picture, I told her. Derek was too relaxed for someone facing federal charges. Maybe he's just arrogant. Maybe. Or maybe he's got an ace up his sleeve that we don't know about. What kind of ace? I don't know yet, but I think we need to be more careful about our next moves. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Derek Vaughn didn't get where he is by being stupid. If he's offering me money to go away, it's because he thinks he can afford it. And if he can afford it, that means he's got something bigger planned. Lyra was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to find out what Derek's real game is, and I want to make sure we're not walking into a trap. How do we do that? We turn the tables. Instead of reacting to their moves, we start making moves of our own. What kind of moves? I looked at the envelope Derek had given me, still sitting on Danny's kitchen table. The kind that make them react to us. Tomorrow, I'd start playing offense instead of defense, and Derek Vaughn would learn that some people fought back harder when you tried to buy them off. The rain continued drumming against the windows, but for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I had a plan. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I spent hours going through every piece of evidence Lyra had given me, looking for the detail that would tip the scales in our favor. At 3 a.m, I found it. Buried in the bank statements was a pattern I'd missed before, regular transfers from Derek's personal account to something called Evergreen Holdings LLC. The amounts were significant, $10,000 here, $15,000 there, always just under the federal reporting threshold. I ran a corporate search on Evergreen Holdings and found exactly what I'd hoped for, a shell company registered in Delaware with Derek Vaughn listed as the managing member.
The company had been formed 6 months ago, right around the time the HELOC money had started flowing. Derek wasn't just stealing my money to fund an affair. He was laundering it through a shell company, probably to hide assets from his wife in preparation for their divorce. That elevated this from simple adultery and fraud to serious federal crimes. I called Lyra at 6 a.m. "I found our smoking gun," I told her. "What is it?" "Derek's been running the stolen money through a shell company. That's money laundering, which carries a 20-year federal sentence." "Are you sure?" "Positive. I've seen this pattern before in federal cases. Derek's not just cheating on his wife, he's hiding assets from her. So what do? We end this."
Today. I spent the morning putting together a comprehensive file. Bank records, corporate documents, hotel receipts, and a detailed timeline showing how Derek and Maren had systematically stolen and laundered nearly $100,000 over 18 months. Then I made 3 copies. One went to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit in Seattle. The second went to Derek's wife, along with photos of his hotel visits with Maren. The third went to the managing partner at Morrison, Klein & Associates. By noon, Derek's carefully constructed world was starting to collapse. His wife called me first. "Mr. Trenner, this is Patricia Vaughn. I received your package this morning." "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Mrs. Vaughn." "I'm not. I've suspected Derek was hiding assets for months, but I couldn't prove it. Your evidence gives me everything I need for my divorce attorney." "I hope it helps." "Oh, it will. Derek's about to discover that community property laws work both ways." The second call came from Morrison, Klein & Associates. "Mr. Trenner, this is James Morrison. I understand you've made some serious allegations about one of our partners. I've provided documentation of criminal activity. What you do with that information is up to you. Derek Vaughn has been suspended pending investigation. If your allegations prove accurate, he'll be terminated immediately." "And reported to the state bar?" "Among other things." The third call was from Derek himself. "You son of a dog," he said without preamble. "You have no idea what you've done." "I've done exactly what I told you I'd do. You had 24 hours to make this right. Instead, you tried to buy me off." "This isn't over, Trenner." "Actually, it is. The FBI has your shell company records. Your wife has photos of your hotel visits. Your law firm has documentation of your financial crimes. You're finished, Derek." The line went quiet for a long moment. "What about Maren? What about her?" "She doesn't deserve this. She was following my lead." "Maren made her own choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences." I hung up and immediately called Maren. "We need to talk," I said when she answered. "Reid, I can explain." "No more explanations. Meet me at the Lantern Room in 1 hour. And Maren, bring your checkbook." She was already there when I arrived, sitting in the same corner booth where Lyra had first shown me the evidence. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days, pale, exhausted, the kind of hollow-eyed desperation that came from watching your life implode in real time. "Derek's been arrested," she said without preamble. "I heard. FBI doesn't mess around with money laundering charges. His wife is taking everything. The house, the cars, his partnership stake in some real estate investments. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy." Maren looked at me across the table, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, scared, human. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you pay me back every penny you stole, with interest." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then you sell the house, liquidate your retirement account. Figure it out." "And if I do that? If I pay you back?" "Then I don't press charges. You keep your job, your freedom, and what's left of your dignity." "And our marriage?" "Our marriage ended the day you decided Derek Vaughn was worth more than 6 years of my life." She started crying then, quiet, desperate tears that might have moved me a week ago. But I'd seen too much, learned too much about who she really was underneath the polished exterior. "I never meant for it to happen like this," she said. "But it did happen, and now we both have to live with it." I slid a settlement agreement across the table, a document I'd drafted that morning requiring full restitution within 60 days and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. "Sign it," I said. She read through the terms with the careful attention of someone who knew she was beaten. Then she signed her name and slid the paper back to me. "What happens to Derek?" "Derek's looking at federal charges, disbarment, and a very expensive divorce. He'll probably serve 3 to 5 years if he's lucky." "And Lyra?" "Lyra gets to start over with a clean slate. Sometimes the smartest rat is the first one off the sinking ship." Maren finished signing the papers and stood up to leave. At the door, she turned back one last time. For what it's worth, Reid, I really did love you once. I know, I said. That's what makes this so pathetic. She walked out into the Seattle afternoon, and I sat in the booth for a while, thinking about how quickly 6 years of marriage had been reduced to a legal settlement and a stack of evidence files. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyra. Saw the news about Derek's arrest. Well played. Thanks for the assist. What are you going to do now? I thought about that question as I walked back to my truck. What did you do after you'd systematically destroyed the people who'd betrayed you? How did you move forward when justice had been served, but the satisfaction felt hollow? Start over, I texted back. Same as everyone else. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office, a real office this time, not a room above a coffee shop, when Danny brought me a newspaper article. Derek Vaughn had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for money laundering and fraud. Maren had sold the house and moved to Portland, where she'd taken a job with a smaller company at half her previous salary. Feel good? Danny asked. Feel finished, I said. And it did. The case was closed, the debts were paid, and the people who'd wronged me were facing the consequences of their choices. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was something like peace. Outside my office window, the Seattle rain continued its eternal rhythm, washing the streets clean for whatever came next. I had a new case starting Monday, a simple insurance fraud investigation, the kind of straightforward work that didn't involve betrayal or broken marriages or federal crimes. It sounded perfect.